So on one hand, the Nintendo Switch 2 is looking like a great piece of kit. The hardware looks impressive. It looks like a great refinement from the Switch 1, and the games announced for it so far are pretty stellar. On the other hand, the business model is where things kind of get a little questionable, and we have already talked about a number of topics in this regard, starting with the $80 MSRP for Mario Kart World, and Nintendo trying to standardize that price point for major game releases, their accessories being more expensive now. So, for example, the Switch 2 Pro controller is $10 more expensive than the original Pro controller. The Joy-Con 2 controllers are also $10 more expensive, whereas the Joy-Con 1 controllers were $80. The Joy-Con 2 controllers are $90 a pop, and this is just the start. Scrolling down, you can find myriad accessories with all kinds of price points. And yeah, this stuff adds up. Then there's the fact that upgrading certain Switch games to Switch 2 edition games require you to pay. Right now, based on Japanese prices, the rumor is that Switch 2 editions of games like Mario Party Jamboree and Kirby Forgotten Land, which add extra content, will be priced at $20, and stuff like Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which is primarily just improved frame rates and resolution and better performance, those upgrades will be $10. Though it is worth noting that Nintendo has released a list of games whose updates will be free. They're not Switch 2 editions, but the patches will allow them to take some advantage of Switch 2's new hardware prowess. And so games like Mario Odyssey and ARMS and Captain Toad and Link's Awakening, so on and so forth, will come with free updates that, according to Nintendo, may improve performance or add support for features such as Game Share and select games. But games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom seem to be strictly relegated to the Switch 2 editions for upgrades. They don't seem to have some kind of free upgrade that only improves the frame rate and performance without additional features like the Google Maps for Zelda app and whatnot. And then beyond that, a couple additional hidden costs or extra costs include the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, which is essentially the tech demo game for this console, akin to Astrobot Playroom, which was a free game for PlayStation 5, and Wii Sports, which was a free game for Wii. Turns out the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour will be a game you have to pay for. Many argue that this should be free, and I would absolutely agree with that. This thread alone has garnered over 58,000 upvotes and tons of views and a lot of interactions. Japan's price for the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour game is 990 yen, which translates to roughly $6.76. So I would expect this game to be $10 in the US, which is kind of ridiculous when you consider that Wii Sports and Astrobot Playroom, which look to be far more fleshed out games, were completely free and were included with their respective consoles to kind of demonstrate their capabilities. This feels like a missed opportunity to have this be a paid product. A lot of people won't buy this and won't pay for this. And another hidden cost worth considering is the fact that for basic features like voice chat, you do need to subscribe to Nintendo Switch Online. And so that's another additional cost on top of everything. And then something else that's kind of egregious is the fact that if you want the Nintendo Switch 2 version of the GameCube controller, that is paywalled behind a Nintendo Switch Online subscription, and you also have to pre-order Nintendo Switch 2. The fact that paying for a product is paywalled behind a subscription is ridiculous, and then it's worth noting that the Switch 2, given the high demand surrounding it, it'll likely be difficult to pre-order one for a lot of folks, and for those people, guess what? They won't be able to get a Switch 2 GameCube controller until Nintendo changes this policy. Layer that on top of tariffs impacting Nintendo to the point where they had to delay pre-orders for Nintendo Switch 2, which were originally slated to go live on April 9th, 2025, indicating that price points for manufactured hardware like the console and the accessories and whatnot might change, potentially increase. And you've got a situation where people are not happy with all these extra expenses, how expensive gaming is getting. And the fact that Nintendo chose to bury a lot of this information, not mention it during the Nintendo Direct, and kind of scatter information in a way that is just going to confuse consumers. And then on top of all that backlash, Nintendo's facing even more negative PR because of the way they're handling physical releases. So let's start by talking about what people discovered about Switch 2 Enhanced Editions, namely the physical versions of those games. What Nintendo said during the Direct was the following.
The Nintendo Switch 2 Edition games you just saw will be available as both physical and digital versions.
They specifically highlighted in the Direct that Switch 2 editions of Switch 1 games will be available both digitally and physically. And the ideal way to handle the physical version of a game is to include all the game data in the game cartridge. But there's a possibility that that's not the case based on an investigation done by Twitter user Does It Play, who posted the following on April 5th, 2025, when they inquired Nintendo UK customer support about Switch 2 Enhanced Edition's physical versions. So it reads right here, according to Nintendo's own support, the Switch 2 Enhanced Editions were false advertising during the Direct. After trying to nail them down for an answer, they confirmed to one of our followers it's just Switch 1 cards with a code for the upgrade to the Switch 2 Edition. No reason to buy these then. And then right here we have the reply from Nintendo's UK customer support that reads, yes, we can confirm that the upgrades will be download codes, implying that the Switch 2 editions of games won't have all of their game data in the game cart if you purchase the physical edition. It's just the Switch 1 cart, which on top of that requires a digital download, which defeats the whole purpose of having a physical edition for Switch 2 editions of games. That is information that was not disclosed during the Nintendo Direct when they said that physical and digital versions of Nintendo Switch 2 Edition games will be available. And beyond that, if you look at Nintendo Switch 2 Edition carts, it reads right here that the game includes the Nintendo Switch game and the Nintendo Switch 2 Edition upgrade pack, but there's nothing here detailing that a download is required. And so what people are hoping for right now is that this is all ultimately the customer support representative not having the correct information, as customer support can be wrong sometimes in regards to information like this. So Wario64, for example, responded to the situation with, customer support can sometimes give incorrect info, so hoping this is inaccurate since the fine print on the boxes do not mention download required. And it's weird they would be codes when Nintendo is pivoting to game key cards instead of download codes of retail games. So it is entirely possible that the UK customer support representative did not relay accurate information. But on the other hand, the lack of transparency and communication on Nintendo's part when it comes to detailing exactly how this stuff works, it's what's causing people to essentially speculate and reach out to customer support representative and try to get clarification just anywhere. But at the same time, there's also the possibility that Nintendo Switch 2 Edition games might be as described by the customer representative, where it's just a Switch 1 card and then essentially a code to download the patch. So that's one controversial element in regards to physical editions of Nintendo Switch 2 games. And then the other one is a format of physical editions known as game key cards, which is detailed here on the official Nintendo website. It reads, game key cards are different from regular game cards because they don't contain the full game data. Instead, the game key card is your key to downloading the full game to your system via the internet. After it's downloaded, you can play the game by inserting the game key card into your system and starting it up like a standard physical game card. So what's being described here is essentially a physical version of a game that acts as a digital version. When you buy Switch 2 games that are in game key cards instead of regular game cards, what you have to do is download the whole game online. The game key card essentially is just the key that unlocks your access to the game. And so what we're looking at here is essentially a digital version with extra steps. A digital version that you also have to have the physical key to be able to play it. And so right here we have a tweet from Nintendo that highlights two games, one of them which is a regular game card and one of them which is the game key card. The regular game cards like Donkey Kong Bonanza here, whose full game will be in the game cart, do not require any download, but something like Bravely Default, the HD remaster, there is a label here that highlights that this is a game key card, and so the full game is not in the cartridge. You have to download the game online after you insert the cartridge, and then you have to have the cartridge in the system in order to be able to play that downloaded game, that essentially digital game. Another game that's going to utilize this game key card format is Street Fighter 6. And so Bravely Default and Street Fighter 6 are the two known games so far for Switch 2 that will utilize this format, but you can bet that other developers will probably implement this as well. Now, the one advantage that game key cards have over fully digital games is that you can lend, give away, or sell game key cards, as the ability to access the game is attached to that physical media. But it doesn't change the fact that because a download is still required like a digital game, years and years down the line, decades later, when servers go offline, that game key card will be completely useless when servers go down and you can't access the download that the game key card grants. Whereas regular game cards, where the game data is fully in there, you can pop those in, and no matter what happens on Nintendo's end, you'll always have access to that game. Recall that back in 2023, Nintendo closed down Wii U and Nintendo 3DS shops, making those games unpurchasable. While you can still re-download content that's already owned or download existing software updates, how long will that actually last? Give it a decade and that functionality might go down as well. And once that happens, if you don't have those games already downloaded, you essentially lose access to your purchases. And so decades later, when Switch 2 suffers something similar, those game key cards will serve you no purpose. They'll be completely useless plastics. And while currently the only two games that are utilizing the game key card method are Bravely Default and Street Fighter 6, which is baffling when you consider that frickin' Cyberpunk 2077 is shipping on a regular card with the whole game data in there, you can probably expect a lot of the less consumer-friendly publishers pushing for game key cards, because that will just give them more autonomy over people's ability to access those games. It will just allow them to have more control over people's games libraries. Now, game key cards are an improvement over what some Switch 1 physical game releases did, where the boxes were essentially empty and only included download codes. At least this has some kind of physical media that you can exchange or trade and bargain with and whatnot. But a slightly more flexible version of a bad thing is still ultimately a bad thing. If it's a physical game release, all of the data should be inside the physical media. Game keycards will just give game companies more of a reason, more of an excuse to keep pushing towards an all-digital future. And so this just feels like Nintendo is slowly getting on that trend or enabling that trend, which is really unfortunate. Nintendo's games do all seem to be shipping in regular game cards, which is good, but a lot of third parties will opt for the game key cards method, and it's just not an ideal format. Both for your ability to have access to your games forever, for the long-term future, and for games preservation. When those shops close, when servers go down, Switch 2 games that don't have a regular physical version and can only be accessed through digital downloads and game key cards will disappear forever. And so yeah, the way Nintendo Switch 2 editions might not have all of the data in the game card and might involve you getting a Switch 1 card and then a download code for the Switch 2 upgrade, and then combine that with the whole game key card situation and that format being normalized, on top of all the hidden costs that is causing backlash and just the business model that is kind of making a lot of people squint their eyes, paired with the uncertainty surrounding how the tariffs will impact all of the prices surrounding the Switch hardware, the console, the accessories, you name it, when already we're seeing price increases like $10 extra for accessories like controllers and $10 extra for games whose MSRP have gone from $70 to $80. Combine all of that, and you've got a situation where while the Switch 2 does look attractive as a console and its games do look pretty awesome, it's just, it's demanding a lot from consumers, and in some ways it's disrespecting consumers, especially with the way all of this information people have had to research and Nintendo was so opaque about. So yeah, just stay informed, understand just how expensive the Switch 2 platform is actually going to be. It doesn't just stop at $450. That price point for Switch 2, the hardware, it's in line with what people expected, but it's just everything else, all these little extra costs that add up, that is kind of something that you need to be aware of if you want to get into the Switch 2 ecosystem and understand how much money you're actually going to end up spending over the long term. And then on top of that, you just got to be aware of what buying physical media for Switch 2 will be like. A lot of games will just be regular cards that will work as you would expect physical games would work. But keep in mind that you need to keep an eye out for the game key card labels and the Switch 2 edition upgrades. But yeah, I just figured I'd make this video to further keep you updated on all things Switch 2 and what you need to know in order to make informed decisions about your investment in this platform and ecosystem. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is everything you need to know. And I hope you found this video informative. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on all of this. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.